All right, Cowboys Nation. Before we jump into the heart of today's episode, I want you to do me a quick favor. Drop in the comments the name of a random Cowboys player. Doesn't have to be a star. Doesn't even have to be someone good. It can be a legend, a one-year rental, or just some guy who popped up on a preseason depth chart and vanished. Just throw a name out there. Let's see who y'all come up with. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the meat of today's Cowboys talk. And there's plenty to get through, so buckle up. We're starting off with a little bit of drama, or at least some speculation, around safety Donovan Wilson. There's been some chatter floating around online, sparked by a fan site suggestion that Wilson could be a post-June 1st cut, mainly to free up some cap space. The argument being made is that the Cowboys could save around $8.65 million by releasing Wilson after June 1st. Now, that number caught fire quickly, people ran with it, but let's slow down for a second because there's a lot to unpack and a lot that just doesn't add up. First, that number being tossed around, not accurate. What people are quoting as potential cap savings is actually Donovan Wilson's total cap hit for the 2025 season, not the amount the team would save by cutting him. If the Cowboys wanted to release him today, right now in late May, they'd save around $5.35 million. If they wait until after June 1st, that number goes up slightly. They'd save around $7 million. And just to be clear, those savings would be exactly the same if they traded him instead of cutting him. So the idea that the Cowboys would unlock some magical amount of cap space by waiting until June is simply not how the numbers work. That's not how the cap is structured in this case. But here's the bigger picture. The Cowboys didn't have to wait until June 1st to make that kind of move. Teams can designate a player as a post-June first cut back in March, and the Cowboys didn't do that. They had the option, and they chose not to pull that trigger. That tells you something. It tells you that internally they still see value in keeping Donovan Wilson around. And it's not like they've gone out and made major moves at safety to suggest they're preparing to move on from him. Yeah, they brought back Marquise Bell and Juanya Thomas, but that was expected. They were restricted free agents. Exclusive rights guys? That was routine housekeeping more than anything else. They didn't spend big money. They didn't make any splashy additions at the position. And they certainly didn't draft a safety early. That's why this whole conversation around Wilson being a surprise cut just feels off. If the team really saw him as expendable, the signs would have been there months ago. Instead, he's still firmly on the roster, and the safety room looks almost identical to what it did last year. We're talking about a group that includes Malik Hooker, Wilson himself, Bell, Thomas, or maybe a fringe guy like Elijah Clark who carves out a role on special teams. That's it. That's your core safety unit. No major additions, no real shakeups. Now, do I want to see Bell and Thomas get more snaps? Absolutely. Both of those guys have shown flashes and bring different things to the table. Bell's physicality is exciting, and Thomas has a knack for making plays when given the chance. But if you're planning to go into the season with 4 undrafted safeties and no proven starter like Wilson, you better have a real plan in place. And from everything we've seen so far this offseason, that's not what the Cowboys are signaling. They're running it back at safety. Plain and simple. That's why all this noise about Wilson being on the chopping block feels like a misunderstanding of the cap situation mixed with some off-season boredom. Could the Cowboys cut him? Technically, yes, will they? I'd be pretty surprised. We talked about him months ago as a potential cap casualty, but nothing happened. The Cowboys stayed the course, made their routine re-signings, and didn't bring in real competition. That tells you everything you need to know. If they were going to move on, they would have done it already. There's no incentive to wait. Because again, they could have saved the exact same money back in March by using that post-June 1 designation. But they didn't. And I know some fans get caught up in the post-June 1 deadline like it's some kind of magic switch. Like suddenly teams are going to start making all these massive cuts or trades just because it's June 2nd. That's not really how it works. Sometimes teams do wait because they're limited to only 2 post-June 1 designations per year. But in Wilson's case, that excuse doesn't hold up. There's no real strategic reason to wait. Which is why I think the June 1 narrative gets blown out of proportion in a lot of cases. Yeah, there are scenarios where it matters. This just doesn't feel like one of them. So if you're asking me to put a percentage on whether Donovan Wilson is still on the roster in 2025, I'd say the odds are pretty high. Unless something drastic changes, like a training camp injury or a trade offer that comes out of nowhere, I fully expect him to be part of this team. And not just as a depth guy either. He's likely to be one of the top 3 safeties again. That's the reality of where things stand. Now, shifting gears, we've got to talk about the offensive line, because that group is quietly one of the biggest storylines heading into training camp. And it might not be the flashiest position group, but it's one that's going to make or break the Cowboys' season. The battle at tackle is particularly intriguing, especially on the left side. Tyler Guyton is the name you're going to hear the most, and rightfully so. He's the presumed starter at left tackle. That's the plan. That's the vision, but let's not sugarcoat it. He's got to be better than what we saw last season, because the numbers from last year, they're not good. Penalties were way too high. He looked raw, which isn't surprising given that he was a developmental prospect coming out of college, but year 2 needs to show growth. If he comes into camp looking like the same guy from last year, alarm bells are going to start ringing. He's got all the tools, the size, the athleticism, but tools alone don't win football games. Development does. And here's the tricky part. It almost feels like some fans want him to fail. Like they're so locked in on the idea that the Cowboys reach for him in the draft. They're rooting for him to flop just so they can say, I told you so. That kind of energy is toxic. You can be skeptical, sure, but let the kid play. Let him grow. If he takes a leap forward, this offensive line is in a much better spot. But if he doesn't, then things get complicated real fast. Which brings us to Awesome Richards. He's kind of the forgotten man in all this, but he's firmly in the mix as a backup tackle. Some people are even floating the idea that he could compete for a starting job. Now, let's pump the brakes a little bit. I like Richards as a swing tackle, but I don't think he's ready to start just yet. He played a little over 180 snaps last season. His pressure rate was similar to Guyton's, but it was over a smaller sample size. And yeah, he had fewer penalties, but again, that's not surprising given the lower volume. What concerns me more is that he didn't grade out well as a run blocker. And if you're going to be a swing tackle or potentially a starter, you've got to be reliable in both phases. Plus, he hasn't shown any versatility across the line. Nearly all of his NFL reps have come at left tackle. A few snaps at guard here and there, but he hasn't really played right tackle since college. In fact, the last meaningful reps he had at right tackle were way back in 2020 during his sophomore year. That's a long time ago. So this idea that he's going to replace Terrence Steele at right tackle? I'm not buying it yet. Speaking of Steele, that's another name that's been thrown into the offseason rumor mill. Some have suggested he could be a surprise cut after June 1st because the Cowboys would save a whopping $14 million. In cap space, that number is real. The savings are there. But just because the money makes sense doesn't mean the move does. The Cowboys are still pretty high on Steele. The new offensive line coach, Connor Riley, and offensive line consultant, Clayton Adams, have both expressed confidence in him. They believe the new scheme will help him get back to form, particularly in the run game where he used to excel. Last season was rough for him, no doubt about it. His pass protection regressed. He wasn't the same guy we saw back in 2022. But the hope is that with a fresh coaching staff and a more consistent offensive identity, Steele can bounce back. If he does, great. If not, then yeah, next offseason becomes a real turning point for him. Because if he doesn't improve, the Cowboys will probably move on. That's just the nature of the league. Bottom line, this offensive line group has a ton of question marks. Can Guyton develop into a legit left tackle? Is Richards ready to be more than a backup? Can Steele regain his old form? These are the storylines that will shape the trenches in Dallas this year. And for a team that's always had a reputation for elite line play, this feels like a bit of a crossroads moment. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Rumors are swirling around the NFL as concerns grow over Dak Prescott's injury, which appears to be more complicated than initially thought. What was first considered a manageable setback now seems to be evolving into a serious issue, stirring whispers among fans, analysts, and insiders alike. Sources close to the Dallas Cowboys are reportedly worried that Prescott's condition could sideline him for an extended period, potentially altering the team's trajectory this season. The Cowboys, who have long depended on Prescott's leadership and playmaking abilities, could find themselves in a precarious position if the star quarterback is forced to miss significant time. While the team has maintained a cautious optimism publicly, there are behind-the-scenes murmurs suggesting that the injury might require more intensive treatment or even surgery. Such a development would not only impact Prescott's availability, but could also have ramifications for the team's offensive strategy and morale. Industry insiders have hinted at possible complications arising from the initial injury diagnosis, which might mean Prescott's recovery timeline could stretch far beyond early estimates. The nature of the injury has not been fully disclosed, fueling speculation about the severity and long-term implications. Some experts speculate that if the injury involves ligament or tendon damage, the Cowboys might need to rethink their quarterback. Plans for the rest of the season. This evolving situation is already generating buzz about the potential rise of the Cowboys' backup quarterback. Fans and commentators are debating whether the backup has what it takes to fill Prescott's shoes, or if the team should explore trade options or even look toward the draft to shore up the quarterback position in the near future. The ripple effect of Prescott's injury could thus trigger a series of strategic moves within the organization. While the Cowboys' front office remains tight-lipped, the increasing speculation around Dak Prescott's health is impossible to ignore. If the rumors hold any truth, the impact on the team's playoff hopes and the broader NFL landscape could be substantial. For now, all eyes remain on updates about Prescott's recovery as the football world waits to see how deep this injury crisis might run. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.